Hey, and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. I am Alicia, your host, and today's video is sort of based on a question or a series of questions that one of my students asked. And I've been thinking about arpeggio since last week's video, where we looked at some more elaborate arpeggios and the kinds of arpeggios that maybe you can play if you're an intermediate student. But I wanted to really break things down to a simpler level today. I've got a handout for you with 4 different types of arpeggios, and we're going to go through all 4 while exploring 5 problems that people have when they're trying to play them and how we can fix it and deal with that. Arpeggios are one of the most common piano exercises that people do, along with scales and chords, but arpeggios have some distinct challenges. And I think there's something about arpeggios that actually make them harder even than scales and similar exercises. So I wanted to spend today's video going through 5 mistakes and fixes that people make when they're practicing arpeggios, and hopefully it'll allow this technical exercise to run more smoothly for you. Let's hop to the piano and try them out. All right, so the first and earliest arpeggio that we tend to learn are the crosshand arpeggios, and this is what it sounds like. You're doing a chord in one hand. We're going to start with C chord, and then a chord in the next hand, and then you cross the hand, usually just to finish it off, but you can keep going, and then you do everything in reverse. And like I said, you could extend this as many octaves as you want. You could really drag out crosshand arpeggio if you wanted to, spanning up the keys and down. And I actually find crosshand arpeggios sound really beautiful to improvise with the pedal. It's almost harp-like. It's surprisingly, it's deceptively easy to do something like that, but it sounds really fancy and complicated. So crosshand arpeggio is really pretty. There's a lot that we can do with them, but the big challenge people have with this is the idea of always keeping the hands moving and preparing the hand. So what I see a lot is something like this. So you kind of see what's going on. I wasn't moving the hands. I was basically playing them where they lie. And then as soon as I was done all the keys, then I move my hand. And what that does is creates a pause. Same kind of thing when I'm coming back down. If my hand's not right in place when it's time to go, there's going to be that pause period where I'm like, oh, panicking, trying to find where I'm supposed to go. So what we want to do is always be moving, always on the move. You're always preparing the hand for where you're going. So in this case, my left hand is crossing over, which means as soon as my left hand is done playing, it starts the journey up in an arc. And then as soon as it's done, it comes back down where it's trying to go. So the hand that's crossing always needs to be preparing. If I did a longer arpeggio, my left hand moves, my right hand moves in this constant weaving and arcing. And then we go back down. Now my left hand prepares. Now my right hand prepares to the finish line. Okay, so hand preparation, always being moving towards the next note or the next set of notes, is a crucial component. Just with the metronome, I'll show you what this is going to sound like. It's 60 beats per minute with triplets. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and It was elegant and straightforward to play, not only because I've done it before, that does help, but because my hand was always preparing, so I was never in a rush where I was going. Okay, so number 2, we're going to move on to the second exercise. This is the one hand, one octave arpeggio. And when we stop weaving the hands across each other, we have a lot more work to do in one hand. So one hand is put under a lot more pressure. So this seems simple in theory because we're just going to be doing, in this case, a D major chord, and then the top note. So it's kind of like a 1, 3, 5, 8, 5, 3, 1. But where people get into trouble is with hand cramping or like getting pain and having it feel really claw-like and uncomfortable when they're playing. Because I see people play it like this. They'll prepare the hand, make sure each finger is sitting on the key that it's supposed to play, and then pressing them down like a lever. The fingers are just waiting and ready to go. This is not the way you want to do any octave work, especially arpeggios, because you're gonna cause tension. It's gonna feel awkward. It's gonna look awkward. You're not gonna be able to keep it up. And we always want to keep the hands as loose as possible when we're playing because we don't want to create problems down the road. So what we want to do instead is think about kind of like you're on a pivot. So what I did there is I used my long finger number 2 as sort of an anchor point, and I seesaw my thumb and pinky. Okay, so I start seesaw towards the thumb, and then I seesaw towards the pinky, and then I angle it back. So notice now that instead of holding my hands out, I've got this much more, it sounds nicer. It also looks a little nicer too. We can do the same thing in the left hand. I prefer the fingers 5, 3, 2, 1 with most of my arpeggios, but choose your own adventure. So again, instead of the claw, the thumb's already prepared. We're angling a little to the left towards the pinky, and then we're swinging towards the thumb and back. And again, one of your inner fingers, in this case, I think finger 3, the second note usually serves as a fabulous pivot. That's kind of keeping you anchored so you don't fly off and your hand position doesn't change. Because the main reason that people don't do this is because they're afraid if they move their fingers off the keys, they're going to hit the wrong keys, right? In this case, my thumb's not on the key that it's going to get to. So there's a fear that I'm not going to land where I'm going. But if you have a pivot, then you start doing the same kind of spatial orientation every single time. And you're going to just start to be able to feel the distance, because the distance is always identical every single time you sit down to do that arpeggio. I'm going to play that with our 60 beat per minute metronome, all in triplets, which means we're counting like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2. 1, 2. And again, notice there's a naturalness when you allow your wrists to swing. Okay, so multi-octave arpeggios. Again, we're going to be increasing the complexity here. This would be something that you'd be doing at, let's say, like a grade 2 or 3 level. In this case, we're just doing 2 octaves, but again, you could extend this 3 octaves or more, depending on however far you want to go with it. I think grade 9, 10, etc. are going to be 4 octaves hands together, so it does get quite dense. But big problem with this one, and the main thing I want to talk about with this one in a hand separate context, is the crossing under bit. Because what our thumb has to do is get to the we're doing E major. We're going to get to the E each subsequent octaves to set up our hand again. So what I see a lot is something like this. See if you can see my elbow creep in. Really yanking the thumb under. So I'm doing this chicken dance with my elbow. We have this really big like hoisting of the thumb, and the elbow comes along. So we don't really want to play our arpeggios with these chicken arms. Same kind of thing here when we're crossing over. The thumb really, if we really tuck it under hard, the elbow comes up. It's we want to minimize the effort and the motions that we're doing when we're playing. So the way that we do this is almost like we're finding almost this hybrid between not quite letting the slur go, but getting really, really close, like maybe there's a tiny skip in it. So when you're playing reasonably fast, you don't really notice the gap, but there is a very, very tiny gap, because what I'm allowing to happen is my thumb, instead of crossing under, pulling up my whole elbow, I sort of slide it over. It's almost a side to side or hopping motion. And notice how my elbow doesn't come up when I do that. So I'm still kind of tucking my thumb in, but I'm doing a little hop, and it does create, like, if you're going really slow motion, you're going to hear a small gap, but when you're rolling through it, you don't really notice that gap. So that's how I would remedy the problem of the chicken dance when you're playing your arpeggios. The last 2 pieces of advice and problems that I see are going to apply to exercise 3 and 4. So whether you're doing multi-octave arpeggios with hands together or hands separate, these are going to be relevant to you. Number 1, or I guess technically number 4, is not losing your place. So what happens a lot is if you're doing multi-octave arpeggios, that kind of thing starts to happen, right? So you're going, but since you're doing a lot of rapid fire moving, and you're traversing such a large distance on the keyboard in a short amount of time, it can be really easy to start well, but sort of lose your place as you go, and this especially becomes egregious when you're trying to keep speed. Like if you're trying to play a little bump there, but if you're trying to play at a certain pace, sometimes you don't really know where you're going and you start to hit wrong notes along the way. So how do you not lose your place, and how do you keep your speed? I think a big part of this is going to be all about how you point your eyes when you're playing. So you want to use your eyes to your advantage if you can. I'm assuming you're going to be playing this from memory. You might want to dissect one hand at a time the way that your eyes can move, which gives you the best advantage. So what I like to do, just like with sports, is look where you're aiming. So if I'm aiming to put my thumb here and set up for my next set, that's where my eyes are. I'm looking at where I'm going, and then I might move my eyes up the next octave, and I'm there. And I have to also, this will get into the fifth point, but I have to trust that my other fingers are going to land in the right spot. So I'm always kind of honing in on what's ahead. There's a visual preparation, you could say, that we're doing here. So I'm putting my eyes here. Now my eyes are here. Now my eyes are here. And as I'm coming back down, my eyes are paying attention to where the crossover spot is. In the case of an F scale on the way down, an F arpeggio, the crossover point is the C. So that's what my eyes are doing. And then the same thing in the left hand. But what's going to happen when you're doing two hands? And this is why it becomes a bigger problem when you're doing hands together arpeggios, because you have two hands to watch out for, right? There's a little bit of really analyze how your eyes are moving through this, because what I find that my eyes do here is the moving happens at different times. So my right hand moves first, so I find that my eyes are really aiming here. I'm starting here, but my eyes are aiming an octave up, because once I get there and I'm all set up, then I can look at my left hand for its jump, and then I can look at my right hand for its jump, and then I can look at my left hand for its jump, right? So there's kind of this again, just like sports, always looking ahead to the next thing. Now, final one, and this one supports the fourth one, is it's really useful to practice arpeggios at least occasionally with your eyes closed. These are really hard to do eyes closed. So if you're doing an F scale, I find that you can't see me. I'm closing my eyes for what it's worth. I find those easy eyes closed because each note is stepwise, so there's no big gaps in what you're playing. But as soon as you have skips and leaps and you have big gaps between each movement, especially the octave jumps, that's where it's easy to fall off the rails. So not only do you want to use your eyes to point you where you're going, always looking ahead, but you want your fingers to have a feel for the gaps. Okay, so if I'm doing, again, you can't see me, I'm closing my eyes. If I'm just sort of doing this purely from feel, I kind of have a sense of how far my thumb has to move. And then this is just a third. So I can kind of feel, okay, that's too short because that's a step, but here's a skip. And then keep riding through the arpeggio with your eyes closed. Eyes closed arpeggio is not easy. It might be a disaster, but it'll start to help you build that, oh, I missed it, that tap, oh, I went too far. So that's where I can see, okay, let's try that again. I had a tendency in the left hand to overshoot it. Maybe I went up to B, so I have to feel, okay, it's not that big. It's not as big of a gap as I'm thinking. So then I can go back and try it. Oh, I did it again. So then I can go back and try it again. This is how you know I'm doing it with my eyes closed. Okay, I can really feel it. There we go. And I can kind of work through that and drill it, because if there's points of insecurity and how far to throw the hands, that's going to manifest when you start trying to play it faster and hands together. So to wrap this up, let's do 60 beats per minute. We'll do exercise number 3, multi-octave arpeggios. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3. Now I'm going to to do exercise number 4. I'll count us in again. This one's going to be an F arpeggio. And I'm just going to do it 2 octaves like the previous one. But again, you could extend this as many times as you wanted. As many keys as would fit on the keyboard. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right, so those are the common problems. Hopefully this MuseScore file and brief tutorial helps give you some new things to try in order to overcome some of the challenges you might be experiencing when you're doing arpeggios as your technical exercise. So just to reiterate the 5 strategies, you need to always prepare your hands. You need to work on arcing your wrist and rotating and having a pivot finger. You need to work on your ability to cross under in a way that's skipping as opposed to kind of awkwardly crossing. You want to work on your ability to keep speed while not losing your place. And then finally, you need to improve your tactile or muscle physical memory of the space that you're traversing on the keyboard. As I mentioned before, the downloads for this week's exercises can be found below. I've got the MuseScore file for you if you use it. It's a free program. And I also have the PDF if you just want to kind of quick and simple print something off for yourself to work on these exercises. I should also note that all of these exercises work really well to transpose into different chords. I have 4 chords between the 4 arpeggios, but obviously you could do whatever chords you want, practice whatever chords you want. The fingering is basically the same with some slight modifications if you're doing black key arpeggios, but that's a little bit more advanced, so I wanted to just stick to the basic C arpeggio, D arpeggio, E, F, G, A, B, those ones for now, and then maybe we can do a little bit harder arpeggios later and the problems that those create. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. Let me know if you've got, as always, any strategies of your own for playing arpeggios successfully. Some of you out there are probably better at playing arpeggios than me, so I'm always happy to have your advice. And even if you're not, even if you're a little fresher on the road, you probably still have some interesting stories or strategies or hazards that we could all stand to learn from. Thank you so much for sharing. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.